When I've been looking at Biden policy as of recently, only one question comes into my mind, and that is, how is it that so many people will keep trying these obviously failed economic policies over and over again? You see, Biden has been doing, well, he's been doing the Jimmy Carter thing, and though I think that comparison is not completely apt, there is certainly a good bit of similarities here. In many of his economic policies, Biden has been utterly terrible. And one of the biggest effects of his terribleness has to be the labor market and how it has been over the past 4 months or so. Because you see, the economic numbers for the labor market have been pretty bad. I mean, they expected 1 million jobs to come back in the first quarter of 2021, and they got 230,000, which is decidedly less than what they expected. Of course, this was all couched in the prerequisite mulings about how, well, it's not that big of a deal. You see, we weren't really expecting 1 million jobs. We just put that in to get your hopes up without actually delivering, which is just an absurdity. You see, politicians never want to over-promise and under-deliver, at least not if they don't think they can get away with it. Most of the times, when it comes to hard numbers like job reports are, you want to have underperforming estimations and then overperforming actualities. The exact reverse of what's happening now. And this joblessness has become an absolute crisis in the country as of now, because the Chamber of Commerce has even admitted it, that the U.S. labor shortage is now a national economic crisis. And the reason why this is happening is obvious. Everyone can see it, or at least everyone with a basic understanding of economics and without certain predilections towards the nonsensical, i.e. communists. And that is, you're pumping money into people's bank accounts for free. You're not giving them an incentive to work, and so they're not working. And that is something which has been explained by so many people, because once again, everyone understands this, but it is baffling. Not that this is happening necessarily, and that it's causing what it's causing, but that people keep trying this crap. Inflation has been tried before. It was tried in the Soviet Union, and we all know how that worked out for them. They had to completely destroy their currency multiple times throughout their existence. Just about every 10 years or so. They had to just destroy a bunch of currency in order to bring down inflation, no matter how much they tried to control prices and pretend that it didn't happen. It caused a lot of shortages and things like that. That's what was going on in the Soviet economy. It happened in Germany during either the Weimar Republic or any of the other times where, North Korea's tried it. Many other places have tried it. Venezuela. Everyone's tried inflation. Everyone's tried giving other people free money. It happens all the time. It's the bane of universal democracy. People eventually realize that they can just vote themselves money. And that is exactly what's happening here. It is always worth it to mention that Biden is bribing the voters that, of course, aren't dead. Don't worry, YouTube. I'm not suggesting any fraud. Don't worry about it, Hong Kong. Totally fine. The election was totally fine. I still want to be on YouTube even if I don't care about it. But, man, I just got off track. He is bribing the voters. This is undeniable. One of his main campaign promises, and one of the ones that he spent the most time actually trying to get done, though he didn't do it satisfactorily to the leftists and communists, was the stimulus checks. And do not be fooled into believing that the communists think that this should be a one-time thing, or that this is something that should only exist in pandemics, because that's not true. What the communists want to happen is they want the stimulus checks that are going on right now to be a permanent thing. They want unemployment benefits for everyone, and at all times, to the point where working is disincentivized. And even if they do not want them to be necessarily unemployment benefits, they want things like federal jobs programs, otherwise known as fake job programs, because that's what ends up happening when you essentially outlaw unemployment and then give everyone a job on the government dole. What ends up happening is the government doesn't have all those jobs to actually fill, or at least doesn't have them in the areas that people would be accepting of that sort of thing. I'm sure they'd have plenty of roles in the military, but you're not going to see a whole lot of that out of federal jobs programs, now are you? And so what's going to end up happening is you're going to get a lot of mudflinging jobs. You're going to get a lot of empty city building jobs, as you see very often in China, often with very disastrous results, by the way. Oh, man. Did you guys see that story about the China building shaking, one of their top 5 skyscrapers shaking and like falling down just at random? Ooh. Oh, I have things to say about China, and I have plans to talk about that later in an extra video, which will be coming fairly soon here. I still have a few plans before we get to that, though. But on top of the utter nonsensical monetary policy that Biden has been going through, he's also has an utterly nonsensical energy policy, because in the middle of extreme rise in gas prices to the point where filling up half my tank now costs more than it took to fill up my entire tank not 3 months ago. Despite that, Biden is still doing anti-energy policies, denying a permit in Alaska to do certain oil and gas production on Alaska's Arctic refuge. And it's just amazing that this is the hill Biden wants to die on top of course, the economic policy. Because once again, these sorts of gas policies have been tried before, and you know what happens? It doesn't work. Look at Venezuela, for instance. All of the regulations there with regard to their energy sector, and the fact that they have one of the most oil-rich countries in the world, very high in natural resources, could not stop the fact that their oil industry utterly imploded at the sign of any stress. And this is what is kind of happening in America right now. Now, we've gone from the point of back in Trump's presidency of having energy independence to the point where now in the Biden administration, gas prices are going up. We're losing our energy independence. I don't know if we've actually lost it yet, but we're certainly on the direction of going there. All of the gas pipelines and gas projects that he's canceled are all going to add up eventually to us being energy dependent on places like Russia or places like, other places around the world, the Middle East and the like. And what's going to end up happening, of course, is that prices are going to rise and they're going to be subject to foreign influence more than they were under Trump. And gas prices are generally going to be higher because supply is less. Now, the media can pretend all day if it wants that somehow this is a factor of demand, but the fact of the matter is demand for gasoline is fairly consistent. The consumer generally, when you get massive spikes or lulls in gas prices, it has to do with the supply of gas available. Because the fact of the matter is, everyone wants gasoline. Everyone wants oil. It's been that way for a whole century. The demand is fairly consistent in that it is always very high, and there's almost never enough of it. And what's going to happen is it's going to be almost entirely dictated by the supply of gasoline. And as gasoline supply goes up, prices go down. And as gasoline supply goes down, prices go up. And the argument for supply is much more clear in this instance rather than the argument for demand, because the country was opening up all of the second half of last year. Most of the red states in the country were already almost completely open by that point. And that didn't really change going into the beginning of 2020. What did change going into the beginning of 2020 was Biden's policies with regard to oil. Failed policies. provably failed policies that continue to fail to this day. Yet we continue to try them, and that truly is the question of this particular video. Why do people keep trying these failed economic policies? Provably failed economic policies that have failed all over the place, especially over the past century, as ideologies like socialism and fascism, one and the same, two sides of the same coin in my view, come to power, destroy economies, and then get kicked out eventually. Why does this keep happening? And there's only one reasonable answer to this fact, and that is that most people do not understand basic economics. Most people have no interest in it, and can you really blame them? Honestly, having interest in economics at all is a bit of an intimidating task. Trying to figure out how economics works, how the movement of materials and labor works, is incredibly difficult. And I can't blame anyone for not wanting to understand it or not wanting to try to understand it, because it is complicated. Or at least it seems complicated on the outside. But the fact of the matter is, basic economics is, well, basic. Once you understand a lot of the mechanisms that undergird our entire economy and have undergirded any functioning economy for all of time, suddenly it becomes much easier to see these failed economic policies for exactly what they are. Failed economic policies. And not to do them again. But, of course, no one cares about these things. They don't even care about the history of the past 40 or 50 years, seeing the Soviet Union collapse completely, when most people didn't have any sense that would happen at all. It's hard to understate how much of a surprise it was that the Soviet Union did in fact fall when it did. People were still in the Cold War mindset. They still thought Russia was a powerful entity that could survive for decades. But it just collapsed. It stopped existing because its economic policies were utterly disastrous. And there's even an argument that they never even recovered from World War II. That's how bad these economic policies can end up being, particularly the inflation one when it comes to Russia and the Soviets. That was what was happening mostly then. Now, I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. If you enjoyed that video, do in fact subscribe down below. And importantly, we have an exclusive extra rant on Odyssey. It's going to be the first link down in the description. I suggest you go check it out. It's about the concept of the hero's journey and how people are very quick to claim rip-off status because of vagaries within the plot being similar. And that's what I talk about there. We're going to start doing that around 2 times a week. And also, subscribe elsewhere if you want to, whether that be Minds, where I sometimes put my thoughts as well, and other places like Parler and Gab, as well as all of my alt-tech platforms, which will be rotated through with those extra rants where they will be, whether that be BitChute, or it be, as already stated, Odyssey, or Brighteon, or Rumble. All of those places are down in the description, and as well, another important one, breakingонthedaily.locals.com. I want to see people get into there, and I want to see you there. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. I'm KelKidman. This has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.